The Olympic Games are one of the most prestigious events in the world of sports. Every 4 years, for 2 weeks, various cities around the world host the Games, whether they be winter or summer games, and go to great lengths to build huge and immaculate venues to host the various events. Often, these cities spend billions and billions of dollars to construct brand new venues to host the Games, all for an event that lasts for only 2 weeks. But here's a question. What happens after the Games are over? How are these massive structures put to use? Sadly, many of them are left abandoned, serving as relics of a time when the world's greatest athletes came together to compete. From Rio de Janeiro to Beijing, here are 5 Olympic venues that are completely abandoned. The 2016 Summer Olympic Games were held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and they were the first Olympic Games held in a Latin country in nearly 40 years. In preparation, the city built many different venues and villages for the athletes to stay in. It was lots of work and billions of dollars for a 2-week event. After it was all said and done, everyone left. When this happened, the buildings quickly fell into states of disrepair, and locals moved in to loot anything and everything they could. Some of the buildings were actually demolished. However, the debris has not been cleaned up. One area that is of concern is the media center, where various new agencies and reporters would give commentary, highlights, and recaps of the day's events. After it was demolished, many of the beams and insulation were left to either rot or rust. This posed a danger for anyone who happened to venture into the area. Another building that is a shame to see is the aquatic facilities. What was once the place where huge names like Michael Phelps dominated is now totally abandoned. In the main area, pools of stagnant water have turned into breeding grounds for mosquitoes. Everywhere else through the venue has been trashed. Looters came in shortly after the end of the Games, taking everything from televisions to lockers to furniture and fixtures. There were actually plans to tear the building down shortly after the Games were over. However, little to no progress has been made, leaving it as nothing more than an eyesore in the area. In 1931, the city of Berlin won the right to host the Summer Games of 1936. At this time, Adolf Hitler was just rising to power. However, the world did not currently know the evil person that Hitler actually was. The city poured every available resource into the project, building 145 buildings and even constructing a stadium that could seat 120,000 people. The German people were incredibly proud of these games, and everywhere you turned, the now infamous swastika symbol could be seen. So what became of these huge structures? Everything has been left to ruin. Chief of these places was the Olympic Village that housed all of the athletes. Now, it is little more than a huge concrete shell of what was a bustling city for a short time. The House of Nations, which was the main dining hall, was at the center of the Olympic Village. So many people ate there that in just 3 weeks, athletes and their coaches had consumed 100 cows, 91 pigs, more than 650 lambs, and drank 8,000 pounds of coffee. Now, it is hollow and cold. The village wasn't immediately abandoned, though. During World War II, the facilities served as a German military academy and later as a hospital. But once it came under communist control, it served as a place of interrogation and torture. The Soviets occupied the village for over 50 years until the Berlin Wall finally fell and communist rule was ended in Germany. Now, the village stands rotting, falling apart as time passes on. People tend to forget how many buildings and venues are constructed for an Olympic Games. Not only are venues built to host the actual events and places built to house the athletes, but multiple training centers have to be constructed, and even additional hotels for the numerous spectators. So, in 2004, when the city of Athens, Greece, hosted the Summer Olympics, it built all of these things as well. However, the landscape looks much different than it did over 16 years ago. Of course, there was the Olympic Sports Complex, which is nothing more than a giant concrete monument today. Near the city of Marathon, there was the Skineas Center, which hosted the rowing and canoeing competitions. Today, it's just some dilapidated bleachers next to a body of water. The abandoned beach volleyball venue in Neofaliro is especially depressing. It is a huge, open-air complex looking down onto a sandy, overgrown plot of land. The Olympic swimming complex, the training centers, the softball stadium, the taekwondo stadium, all lie empty. These not only serve as a bit of an embarrassment for the Greek people, but also as a source of outrage. In total, the country spent nearly 9 billion euros on everything. Around this time, the country suffered through a 6-year-long depression with record unemployment, homelessness, and poverty. How could a country allot so much in resources to an event that lasted only a few weeks when its own people were suffering in a horrendous way? Today, the once vibrant village resembles a ghost town. In the late 80s and early 90s, Sarajevo was a city at the center of some serious political unrest. However, they were still able to put on a pretty impressive display for the Olympics. 49 countries flocked to the city in 1984, ready to represent their homelands despite the fact that this was the first time the Winter Olympic Games were being hosted by a communist state. The venues were constructed and the events went on. Even after the Games were over, many of the venues continued to see use. However, from 1992 to 1995, the country of Yugoslavia broke up following a long and brutal conflict, and the venues were abandoned. Just above the city, in the foothills of the mountains, was a bobsled track. During the siege of Sarajevo, it was used as an artillery stronghold. Now, it is overgrown and covered in graffiti. Another place that was used as an artillery position during the war was the ski jump venue on Mount Igman. Bullet holes riddle the place that was once used for competitive skiing. A billboard blocks the end of one of the jumps, and even the metal podium that is on site is crumbling. There are so many stories that can be told from these locations, not just about the Olympics, but the events that followed as well. Sarajevo was a very violent place in the years that followed the Games, and the toll it took on the various venues is easily seen today. In 2008, the Summer Olympics were held in Beijing, China. Being the country that they are and wanting to put on a great show for the world, China spared no expense for these games. Massive venues were built with a level of intricacy that had never been seen before at an Olympics. After all of the places were built, China had set a new record for the most money spent by a host city for the Olympics. They dropped a cool $45 billion. But was it all worth it in the end? What happened to the structures that they built? Two of the main buildings, the Bird's Nest and the Water Cube, are actually still big tourist attractions. However, they are the only two venues that still have any real use. Today, you can barely tell that there were once tracks in the arena. It has been reclaimed by nature, the track full of trees, shrubs, weeds, and all sorts of other greenery. Sadly, this isn't the only example. Everything from the beach volleyball to the shooting arenas looks almost like a post-apocalyptic city. There seems to be some hope for some of these venues in the future, though. In 2022, Beijing will make Olympic history by being the first city to host the Summer Olympics and a Winter Olympics. It is rumored that many of these venues will be refurbished and repurposed for the Winter Games, including the Bird's Nest and the Water Cube, which will be called the Ice Cube in 2022. Only time will tell what ends up happening, but hopefully these once magnificent areas can be brought back to life once again. The Olympic Games are some of the few times that countries can come together in the spirit of competition, putting politics and differences aside for a short period. Sadly, much of these principles are abandoned in the months and years after. It seems almost poetic how the venues are treated to the same lack of attention and love. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, be sure to click the link on screen now. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.